Okay, so hello everyone. We welcome you to the Education Student Council's Conference Week 2021. My name is Stefania and I will be your moderator for the session today. So this Conference Week is organized by the Education Students Council in partnership with the Faculty of Education at Western University. This is session number 10, and the session is titled One Point of the Triangle, Opportunities in Community-Based Teaching. We would like to start off by thanking our speaker, Jessie Collins, for taking the time from her busy schedule to share her knowledge and expertise with us. You have already read their bio on the Conference Week website, so you know who they are. This session will include a 40-minute presentation followed by a 20-minute Q&A discussion. So we ask that you please turn your audio and video off for this session on Zoom, and during the Q&A, please type your question in the chat box, and I will read it out to the speaker, or just if you can have access to the chat, that's fine as well. In case we don't have any questions, we'll hand the session back over to Jessie if she has any additional knowledge or information regarding the topic that she wants to discuss. And just make sure at the end, please fill out your check for understanding form that you can find on the Conference Week website under this session name. And if you have any questions, you can contact the organizing team, and I hope you enjoy the session today. So Jessie, the floor is yours. You can go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today. It's my first time presenting on Zoom, so I hope you'll all be so understanding and patient with me. I also have two tiny humans at home with me, so you might hear them in the background. I apologize. We're doing some remote learning and some daycare closures. So today we're here to talk about community-based teaching and opportunities for Ontario certified teachers within community organizations. So before we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about myself because I think that'll help give some context to why we're talking about this today. So I went to Western for 5 years. I have my Bachelor of Science, which I got in 2010, and then I graduated from Althouse in 2011. And during my time at Western, I also worked at the Children's Museum in many different capacities. So I've been there for about 13 years. I'm currently in the role of education specialist, but I've done every job in programming at the Children's Museum at one point in my career there. So I started out part-time in my undergrad, and then I moved into full-time the October following graduating from Teachers College at Althouse. So I did do the one-year program, so it's slightly different than the two-year program that you guys are experiencing, but it had a lot of the similar aspects to it. I also, in my spare time, do some occasional teaching for Thames Valley District School Board. So I started doing that just a couple of years ago. And this year I've mostly been doing remote learning, occasional teaching, which has been a really cool experience and something new to try out. So today we're going to be talking about the homeschool and community triangle. So you may not have seen this before. It was brought to my attention by the Child and Youth Network in London, which if you have not heard of the Child and Youth Network, I encourage you to check it out. They are a wonderful resource within the city. It's a network of multiple different organizations that offer services for children and families. And they talk about this triangle of home, school, and community all impacting student learning and student success. And so the idea is that it's a whole student approach, that children from birth are learning at home first, and then stretching into the community, and later on using that foundation that they've already built at home and in the community into a more formalized education setting like a school. But each point of this triangle, home, school, and community, are all equally balanced. They all influence each other, and they all ultimately impact student learning and student success. So this is the triangle that we're talking about. When I say one point of the triangle, we're going to be looking through the lens of the community point on that triangle today, to look at how Ontario certified teachers can work through the community to ultimately support students and impact student success. So in that lens, the London Children's Museum is part of that community. So with my experience at the Children's Museum, we're going to be looking at the Children's Museum as one of those community partners on that triangle. So the London Children's Museum's vision is to ignite curiosity through the power of play. And our mission is to provide children and their grown-ups with extraordinary hands-on learning experiences in a distinctly child-centered environment. We started our Children's Museum. Our founder, Carol Johnston, started the Children's Museum as the first children's museum in Canada back in 1975, after she visited the Boston Children's Museum and thought that Canada needed one of these awesome children's museums. And then in 1982, we took over our current space on 21 Warncliffe Road South. And the exhibits looked a little bit different than they do today, but it was really the foundation for us. Prior to having this building, our founder was taking kits of materials into different parks. We also occupied a storefront downtown at one point, but really 21 Warncliffe Road South has been our home for quite some time. Today, we are reaching around 85,000 visitors a year on average. And about 8,000 of those visitors are students coming for school programs or accessing other programs with us. So if you've been to the Children's Museum, you probably remember it a little bit more like this. So this is our TD My Place in Space exhibit on our 3rd floor. It has our Star Lab over in the corner, in the back corner there. And this is our My Arctic Discovery exhibit. This is our newest permanent exhibit, also on the 3rd floor, just on the other side. So these are kind of the look and feel that you might recognize, or maybe you visited as a child or as an adult coming with children, or maybe both, which can be interesting to compare what you remember, what you think was a lot larger when you were a tinier person. So this is kind of what our home looks like right now. If you haven't heard, we are in the process of designing a new space for ourselves. So while we love our current building, we are really excited to be moving into our new space. And that new space will be at 100 Kellogg Lane. So this is in the old Kellogg's cereal factory. So we will be on the 4th floor. And this new building will be designed to support wonder and curiosity. It'll have 8 brand new exhibits. It'll have over 35,000 square feet of open concept exhibit space. And we're currently in the architectural planning and exhibit design phase right now. So I did bring some renderings of our upcoming exhibits as well, so you can get an idea of kind of the feel of what they'll be like. These aren't the exact designs, but the renderings kind of give you more of an idea of the feel of what our new exhibits are going to be like. This has been really exciting for me to be a part of, so I hope you guys enjoyed these as well. So this is Branching Out. Branching Out will be the first exhibit that you see when you walk into our new space. You can see it's kind of like a forested area. This is the Wonder Lab. So the Wonder Lab is really a space for tinkering. So in the front section, we'll have lots of loose parts, lots of things to experiment with. And then in the back section where you see those large tools, that'll be more of like a workshop with workbenches for children to create with their families or their classes. And then of course, off to the back and the left, we've got some messier art spaces for students to experiment in. Next, we have Below and Beyond. So Below is kind of like our paleontology exhibit. If you've been in our current building, we have a dinosaur gallery that has a cave system attached to it. So we are building in another dig pit because that's been such a success and a highlight for so many families in our current building. And then there will be a cave system as well for families to explore. And then up above, the beyond section is more about exploring things beyond Earth. So looking at space, whether that's constellations or planets, stars, any of those things. And then this is the last rendering I have for you today. So this is our Shoots and Shoots exhibit. So the bottom floor, the downstairs floor, is all about agriculture and different concepts connected to agriculture. And then connected to that exhibit is going to be our like factory style exhibit, where you can take things from the farming section and bring them into the factory section and kind of explore them a little bit further, see how we can change them and how that process goes. So even though we're building a new space for ourselves, the core of what we do is going to remain the same. So currently, these are kind of the columns that I think of when I'm thinking of the Children's Museum and what we offer. So the first being education programs. Of course, as the teacher on staff, I think of education programs first. So we have several categories of our education programs. So the first being in-class programs. Those are our school programs that we take from the Children's Museum into the schools. So they're 90-minute programs, they're all outdoor ed based, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those programs later on in our session today. The on-site education programs are a little easier to explain. Those are field trips to the Children's Museum, so programs in our exhibits in our building currently. Edu-kits are rentable kits that come with materials, whether that's artifacts or novel materials or a combination of both. And they come with a set of lesson plans for the teacher to run the activities with those materials in their classroom at their leisure, with the supports of the teacher support package. Museum School. Museum School happens to be very near and dear to my heart. So if you haven't heard of Museum School before, it's a program run through the Heritage Council in London, and it has several partnering agencies that participate, and each site runs Museum School slightly differently. So for example, the way we run Museum School would be different than the way that Fanshawe Pioneer Village runs Museum School. But the essence of it is that it's a week-long field trip where students get to come and use the museum as their classroom for that week. And the idea behind that being that when they're immersed in the museum, they get to engage in deeper learning because they're there for so long. They can access more materials than you would be able to on a single day field trip. You can build more relationships. And so in Museum School, we also incorporate a lot of journaling and things of that nature, different ways of getting your ideas out. Museum School has been shown to be very beneficial for students that may struggle in a traditional learning setting because it's much more flexible and all based on hands-on programming. Digital field trips are our newest kind of point on this. They were created in response to what is currently going on in our world. So without having field trips at the Children's Museum, without being able to send our staff into the schools, I spent most of my summer designing our digital field trips. So those are offered for both students learning in school locations currently and students learning in full remote classrooms. So they come with videos, digital supports, and then for the full remote classes, they have suggestions for materials that are commonly found at home that they can use to complete the activities. And for those learning in the schools, we actually mail kits to the schools that have all the materials they need to be able to do the activities. And those activities, those kits are all individually packaged. So for the teacher, it's easy, grab it, give it to the students, and then start running your activity. Again, those are all outdoor education based through our partnership, which we will talk about later on. But that's kind of the overview of what things we do connected to classrooms. But we also offer a ton of other programs for families. So day camps, birthday parties, early years programs, our daily demonstrations, and outreaches to things like festivals. Excuse me. And then, of course, our exhibits and collections are also at the core of what we do. So they create the backdrop or the environment in which we run most of these programs. So currently we have 8 hands-on exhibits and over 7,000 artifacts in our collection. And this is something very unique to the London Children's Museum, because most children's museums do not have a formal collection like a traditional museum would. So it's one of the differing points for children's museums. Most of them don't have collections, but we do, and we are very proud of our collection. And because we are a children's museum and we believe in that hands-on learning, we take our collection items and we make them accessible to children, which is also different than some other more traditional museums. So collections interactions is another thing that's kind of unique to us. And is incorporated heavily into all of our programs, whether that's school programs, public programs, outreaches, anything that we do. We think it's really important to give children the opportunity to interact with those authentic materials. So all of these programs that we run, even our exhibits, which aren't really programs, but help to facilitate those programs. These are all informed by our statement of pedagogy. So this is our statement of pedagogy. At the Children's Museum, we believe that children are competent, capable, and curious. So they are capable of complex thinking. They are competent to be able to expand their learning and their understanding. And we also believe that they are naturally curious. Learning happens when children are playing, and play is essential to their development. And so it's through those play interactions that children construct knowledge about the world around them and are able to explore that play. We also believe that children make meaningful contributions to the world and that relationships are important. So when children are playing, they can take on these different roles and relationships, and they can explore the context of those relationships, whether that's our relationship with a person, an adult, a peer, sibling, family member, or the environment, or even materials or time. So we create opportunities for children to build those relationships and kind of have families be able to like slow down and spend that time together to explore those relationships. Excuse me, sorry guys. Yes, at the Children's Museum, we are also child responsive. So what that means is that we listen to the many different ways that children communicate their ideas or express their opinions. We acknowledge the interests that they have, and then we thoughtfully and intentionally design experiences and exhibits that encourage those reciprocal interactions. We also encourage children to take the lead, to ask questions, excuse me, to wonder, to do all of those things, and to investigate on their own or with a caring adult. And we invite children to indulge their curiosities. So we design our exhibits and our programming to be stimulating learning experiences that invite them to investigate tons of different concepts, from science to art to culture to social interactions to anything in between. Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. But yeah, we want children to indulge those curiosities and explore, especially those intense interests. So particularly in young children, they often get very, very intense interests. We think of things like dinosaurs and how much children love dinosaurs. And so at the Children's Museum, we want to kind of indulge that curiosity and let them sit in it, stew in it, and explore it further, and maybe even spark new paths for thoughts, or new areas for them to examine that they haven't had experiences with yet. So that's kind of an overview of generally what the Children's Museum does and how we do it. So as the Ontario certified teacher at the Children's Museum, my job is to oversee how that statement of pedagogy gets translated into actual programs for students in classrooms, and sometimes at home with their families. So I get to develop, oversee, and run many of our education programs, whether that's the ones in the schools, the ones for field trips, museum, school, our edu kits. I designed and wrote all of them. I assemble them. I do bookings for everything. And our digital field trips as well, now that those have been added into the roster of options. I also get to liaise with a ton of partner organizations. So as a programmer at the Children's Museum, I sit on many different boards. We're part of the Child and Youth Network. I also sit on the Beyond the Blackboard Committee, which is a committee of different outdoor ed centers and museums in the area. So basically other places that offer field trips. And so I get to find out from all these other organizations all the fantastic work that they're doing in the community. And I also get to consult on our educational content for our public programs. So everything that we do at the Children's Museum has an educational component to it. And so oftentimes our public programs team and I work closely together to kind of brainstorm what is best in terms of programming for both our education programs and our public programs. As an OCT working in a community organization, there are benefits across the board. There are benefits to you as the teacher. There are benefits to the students and the greater community. There are benefits to the classroom teachers, and there are benefits to your employer, the community organization. So we're going to explore each of these, and I'm going to give you an example of one of the programs that I think is like beautifully exemplifies all of the great benefits of this triangle approach to learning. So benefits to you as the Ontario certified teacher. I have thought about this so much for myself because I often get asked the question, why don't you work in schools? Or when do you want to go into the school board or work for the school board? And my answer is always, I don't think that that is the right fit for me. And that is okay. And it does not mean that you are not a teacher. It means that we are looking at that triangle as having all equal points or all equally balanced. So as the OCT in the community organization, benefits for me working at the Children's Museum, job responsibilities. I have a ton of flexibility in what sections of the curriculum I would like to focus on for the programs that I run. Sorry, guys. I get to choose my favorite sections of the curriculum that align with the statement of pedagogy from the Children's Museum. And it's almost like a choose your own adventure. I get to pick the things that I love to teach, that I'm excited about, that I know I can translate into excitement for those students. And I can really indulge intense interests of my own. If you look at our education programs at the Children's Museum, there is a heavy focus on science-based programs. And that is because I have an intense interest in the sciences. I also know that teachers ask for those programs. So there is a bit of a balance there, and that the organization needs to fill a need, but also that if you align with an organization that you know has intense interest like yourself, if you're an outdoor person and you can align yourself with an outdoor education center, perfect. Explore those intense interests. All that that's going to do is better serve the students that you're reaching. When you're excited about learning, they're excited about learning. I also get a lot more time to spend on the creative planning parts of offering programs. So I have a ton more of what you would consider a prep time in the schools to think about new ways to approach the curriculum. I also have less budgetary constraints sometimes, depending on what organization you're working for. And flexibility of schedule is huge for me. So I can take vacation time. I can also take personal days, things like that. Some of our staff at the Children's Museum work a 10 to 6 schedule instead of a 9 to 5 or instead of an 8 to 4 or whatever. This is particularly beneficial for me because, for example, my daughter had her first day of school this year, first day of JK, so excited. She's in full remote learning at home. I took the first day of school off. If I was a teacher in a school setting, I would not be able to do that because that's a critical day. So that's one of the benefits of being a teacher in a community organization versus in a school location. I also get to build connections to a ton of other organizations through those boards that I was talking about before sitting on. I get a really good understanding of what's being offered in the city, and how I can access those programs, or how our clients or our visitors can access those programs as well. So if they're really enjoying something that we're doing at the Children's Museum that's art-based, then I can say, oh, did you know that Museum London is also offering X, Y, and Z? And I can help those families access the resources within the community as well. I get a huge connection to families and students. Like I said, 85,000 visitors a year. Although I don't interact with all 85,000 of them, I still do reach a huge portion of them. And so if you're a people person, that's definitely a plus. And I get to interact with hundreds of classroom teachers a year, whether that's through their bookings or through running their programs or surveys, things like that. So that can be great for adding to your toolkit. So particularly early on in my career, I got to interact with so many classrooms with their classroom teacher there, which is rare when you work for the school board, because in my OT position, I don't get to see the classroom teacher with their students because I'm their classroom teacher that day. So that is hugely beneficial to see the different ways that students interact with their teachers and vice versa, and I can add to my toolkit there. So particularly at the beginning of my career, that was a huge bonus for me. Also, I got to influence the pedagogical approach of the organization. So I was lucky to be at the Children's Museum when we were writing that statement of pedagogy. And so depending on where the organization is that you're working with, you can actually have influence on that pedagogical approach versus being told what the pedagogical approach is and that you must align with it. I have a really good understanding of the why we do the things the way that we do. And that's hugely beneficial to me as a teacher. Business understanding. I have to write and maintain budgets. I have to submit those budgets. They don't always get approved for the next year, but the process of going through budgeting is something that I likely wouldn't get to do in a school setting. I also have to have a good understanding of what our marketing is doing, when to submit marketing, what needs to be done for print, things like that. And also grants. So I don't write the grants, I don't do our marketing, but I work closely with our staff that do those things. And so often our grant team will come to us and say like, oh, there's a great grant for this general idea, outdoor ed. And we'll say, oh, I have this amazing idea for programming. And so that collaboration happens. And then we hear back from the donors, then we have to execute on those things. And so that whole process doesn't always come up unless you're working in a nonprofit or a charitable organization like the Children's Museum. And lastly, quite frankly, it's really, really fun. I get to be there for kids' field trips, like almost every day that I go to work. Normally, not this year, unfortunately, but I get to be there for like the most excited day that they've had in like the last few weeks. Sometimes they're looking forward to it for the whole year, particularly the kindergarten classes that come in the spring that maybe haven't had a field trip in a while, and they're just so excited. And so that excitement is definitely contagious and definitely something that I love about working at the Children's Museum. But it's not all about me and the things that I get out of my job. Other stakeholders get things out of me or an Ontario certified teacher working at those community organizations. So students benefit greatly. So when we talk about that triangle, we're saying that students learn everywhere through varied experiences, and that includes at community organizations. So a lot of those students will have accessed those community organizations prior to coming to school. They may not have come to the Children's Museum, but maybe they have. And so they have a familiarity or a comfort with accessing those community organizations, and often they come in a little bit more relaxed in the sense of learning, in this, like, I don't know if I'm explaining that very well. They're it's not as intimidating sometimes as a more formalized learning environment. And so they come at it with a little bit more of just the angle of like, oh, I'm at the Children's Museum to play, because that's what they're used to. And absolutely, you are here to play, but they're also learning. And I know that on the other side. And I can be able to connect that back to the curriculum, but from their perspective, it's a little bit more relaxed, a little bit less like formal. They also learn through relationships with multiple adults and peers. So it's good for them to interact with other adults in the community, and to learn from other experts, other people, and particularly on things like field trips, like the other parents in the classroom as well. And then lastly, through access to unique and authentic materials. So when they interact with community organizations, they're likely getting experiences that they wouldn't get in their classroom. When I think of this, I think of our coprolite. So if you don't know what coprolite is, it's fossilized poo. And we have dinosaur coprolite in our collection. So not every day is a student going to be able to go into school and interact with fossilized dinosaur poop. So that authentic material is brought from the community and can spark interest and conversations and learning far beyond that field trip one day. And that's truly my hope, that whatever they do at the Children's Museum that day sparks something that happens like a domino effect down the road in their classrooms. So when Ontario Certified Teachers work in these community organizations, we're helping to support that student learning far beyond that one instance in the community. It reaches out and affects the other sections of that triangle as well for that student's learning. Ooh, sorry. Whoa, sorry, I clicked the link. What did I do there? Does that look normal again? It does, okay. Sorry, I clicked on the picture. Note, I hyperlinked this. Oh, you guys, we are all learning. Okay, benefits to classroom teachers. So the teachers working in the schools are also going to benefit from having an Ontario certified teacher that's at the community organization. So they benefit in that they're going to have access to additional resources that are curriculum connected and designed purposefully, and enrich their classroom learning. We as Ontario certified teachers understand the curriculum very deeply. And so we can take that knowledge and apply it to a field trip that will then seamlessly fit into the classroom learning. And I truly believe that as Ontario certified teachers, we are able to make that seamless transition for those classroom teachers. You can also provide really unique and new approaches to the curriculum because of that extra time planning and being creative. Sometimes I can come at the curriculum from a different angle, and also because I have different resources. Like you may not have taught your grade 1 living things unit through the lens of dinosaurs before, but I think of that because I know we have a ton of fossils, and our dinosaur jaws lend to talking about what you eat and things like that. So different approaches to the curriculum through the community as well. And then lastly, a connection to the community. So learning from experts is hugely important. If you haven't checked out this Achieving Excellence document from the Government of Ontario, it's the Ministry of Education that put it out. It basically says in one part of it that learning opportunities outside the school through community-based organizations are vital to student success, and that these partnerships with community organizations are beneficial to students from K through grade 12. So if you haven't read through that, I would take a look at that, particularly if you're thinking of applying to community-based teaching positions. It can really give you some good language to use in interviews and things like that. And then, of course, the employer benefits as well. So partnerships with school boards come a little bit easier when you have a mutual understanding of how the school board functions. You also, like I said before, have extensive knowledge of the curriculum, and so you're kind of speaking the same language, and you can translate what the organization does into the curriculum and vice versa quite seamlessly. And then also, when you hire an Ontario certified teacher, you're getting a standard of practice, because that's what the Ontario College of Teachers does. It provides a standard of practice of professionalism. And so that organization is going to get someone who adheres to those standards as well. So program partnerships. So when Ontario certified teachers work in these community organizations, we can create these partnerships that work to ultimately benefit students the most. So I'm going to give you an example of one of the programs that I am so proud of on the Children's Museum's Edge, our in-class education programs. This was one of my first projects that I took on, major projects, when I started in the education specialist role at the Children's Museum. So this is a partnership with Thames Valley District School Board. We reach about 4,700 students a year through this program since 2013, which is huge. It was created in response to some kind of red flags that we were seeing for field trips. The first being the huge cost of busing, and how that was limiting our accessibility in terms of reaching a broader range of students within the area. And then also complexity of registration and payment and all of that, basically all the paperwork that teachers need to do behind the scenes of going on a field trip. So these programs are 90-minute outdoor ed programs for K through grade 6. Teachers get to choose between 2 or more program themes. You can check them out on our education guide on our website if you'd like. And like I said, they were written by myself. They are sometimes run by me and sometimes run by our staff. And they are run at the school locations. So that was our accessibility piece. So if you're telling me that busing is restricting you from being able to access the Children's Museum's programs and what we do, then why not have us come to you? So that got rid of the busing issue, essentially. And then in terms of the complexity of registration, that other kind of flag that we were having, because this is a partnership with Thames Valley District School Board, essentially the only paperwork that the teacher needs to do, the classroom teacher, is fill out the application form. And then I and my partner at the school board, we take care of everything else. We do the payment behind the scenes, we do contracts behind the scenes, and basically you just get your email saying like, hey, we're coming on this date and time, can't wait to see you. And we show up, run the program, clean everything up, and leave. And so all they do is the application form and the survey after the fact. So from the classroom teacher standpoint, it's a free program that is super easy to register for, that is beneficial to students, and that is also beneficial to their unit plans. So really a seamless program. And so since we started it, we've seen a huge rise in the uptake. So every year, basically now for the last 5 years, we've had a wait list within 1 to 3 days after launching the programs. And this year our wait list was about 2,000 students, which is huge. So obviously this year we're not going into the schools, it's the digital field trips, but we're using the same model for the digital field trips. It's just that you get access to the program digital materials instead of our staff coming into the building. It's a lot of videos of me. Those digital field trips this year have reached actually more students than we have in previous years through these in-class programs, which is amazing. We have had additional funding contributed from other areas as well to reach. We've reached about 5,100 students already, and there's still about 1,000 on the wait list, and those are students in both full remote and in the school location. So still reaching everyone and making sure that there's a bit of an equity piece there as well. So just a really good example of when an Ontario certified teacher and the school board are working together and recognizing that homeschool community triangle, we can create programs that work really well for everyone, for the students, for the organization, the community organization, and for the classroom teachers. So yeah, basically there's benefits for students, for educators, when we all work together and recognize that learning happens in that triangle, at home, in the community, and in the schools. And then I put on here a couple of other organizations that you could look at for other supports for classrooms. These are other organizations that may do hiring for things like field trips and things like that. These are partner organizations that I work with through Beyond the Blackboard. So yeah, these are all different places that you could check out. These are all hyperlinked, but I wasn't sure if you guys are getting the slide deck after. Maybe Stefania, I don't know if you know that, but.
We aren't posting the slide deck, but you are welcome if you want. If you want to put the link in the chat or something, you're welcome to do that too.
Sure. Okay. Maybe what I'll do is, if you would like the slide deck or some of the links within the slide deck, you can contact me. So I put my email address here. So if anyone wants to contact me, I'll make it a Google Doc, and then I can share it. Well, you know what I mean. It's not a Google Doc. It'll be Google Slides, but yeah, but I can make it available for anyone that needs it or wants it.
Awesome. Perfect. So if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and type it in the chat box.
Yeah, and it can be about anything, community teaching. It can be also OT.
Can you see the chat box, Jessie, or would you, I can read them out to you, like the questions?
I think, yes. Here. Ooh, fancy. Sorry, it's hard with the slides. Curriculum connections. What is your obligation to follow specific expectations from the curriculum? Does your job allow you to choose whichever ones you want to focus on? Or are you required by the government to meet all expectations in a calendar year? Okay, so from the community teaching standpoint, no, I don't have to meet all of those curriculum expectations in the year, because I'm seeing different students throughout the year. It kind of depends on what program I'm running. So for museum school, where they're here for a whole week, usually we try and cover an entire section of the science curriculum, for example. I have done social studies and other ones, but I try to hit an entire strand for that teacher for the most part, in which case I will try and do that. But otherwise, our other programs have specific strands built into them. And if teachers are curious which ones we're hitting, they can ask. But for the most part, no, I don't have to meet all of them. And I do get to choose, like I said, it's kind of a choose your own adventure, which I kind of love, because yeah, we can pull on different 1 or 2 sections of that curriculum, like specific expectations, and pull a ton out of it that might be cross-curricular. Most of our programs end up being that way anyways. But no, I'm not like held to it, because I'm not the classroom teacher within the school. It's a classroom teacher's responsibility to do that. It's my responsibility to support what they're doing in the classroom. Suggested resources for intermediate senior community-based learning. Yeah, so a lot of the partnering organizations that I listed up there actually do serve students quite a bit older than the population that we serve. We do 0 to age 12. So our programs don't go beyond grade 6, but many of those partner organizations do. Museum London does some fantastic things in this community, particularly with the high school art students. But yeah, if you check out any of those organizations, a lot of them do stretch beyond what we do. We tend to be actually the lower end of the grade levels. So yeah, definitely lots. What will happen to the old museum when we switch to the Kellogg 100 Kellogg Lane? I don't know. We sold the building about 5 years ago. So the building is now owned by someone else, and we're occupying it until we move into 100 Kellogg Lane, but that's really up to the new owner what happens to it after the fact. Yeah. Do most educational community organizations only have an OCT or one OCT? Actually, this is an interesting question. So many community organizations do not employ Ontario certified teachers. And that's one of the things that I would love to see a shift in. I think that there's definitely value, obviously, in Ontario certified teachers working in community organizations. I do know, for example, on the Beyond the Blackboard committee, I myself and one other Ontario certified teacher sit on that panel. And she works for one of the conservation authorities. So some organizations do hire specifically Ontario certified teachers, but others don't specifically ask for it. But I do think it is hugely beneficial to them still. So for us, I am obviously an Ontario certified teacher, but we also have 2 staff that usually run our in-class programs, that partnership with Thames Valley. And we always put on our application forms that we would prefer an Ontario certified teacher or someone with their BEd. But depending on the hiring pool and who aligns with our values the most, that doesn't always happen, but we've definitely employed more teachers in that role than we have non-teachers. So yeah, it's definitely like a mixed bag in terms of whether or not OCTs are hired. Just curious if once the new Children's Museum is set up in the Kellogg's building, will the current one stay open to the public? Yeah, it'll just be our new location at 100 Kellogg Lane. But as far as I know, right now we're staying open in our current building until that new one opens. And like I said, we're still in the architectural planning and exhibit design phase, so it'll still be some time before we move over into 100 Kellogg Lane completely. How did I know this was a better fit for me than a traditional classroom setting? That is a fantastic question, Natalie. I always felt like, even when I was in teachers college, that if I was in a school setting, I would either I would be a very polarizing teacher, because I really, really like to look at the curriculum in new and sometimes odd ways. And I think that fits so beautifully in community learning. I love hands-on learning. I love, bending the curriculum, looking at it from a different way, teaching it in a different way, letting children take the lead, which sometimes can be a challenge. So I think that's how I knew, was that sometimes when I was in school settings, that kind of value was sometimes hard to fit into the constraints that you get sometimes in schools. I think I could teach kindergarten because I could see that kind of aligning within a school. That's why most of my OT days, or all of them actually, are in kindergarten, because that curriculum aligns so beautifully with my own personal pedagogy. But yeah, I think it was just a feeling that I had. And also I think having experience working in a community setting really helped with that. So if you're kind of on the edge and you're not really sure, I would recommend like volunteering or applying to some community-based learning opportunities first, or teaching opportunities, and just trying it out and seeing if you like it. I love the flexibility that this job has, and so many other things about it. But yeah, it's definitely a feeling that I've always had, even through teachers college. And I think that comes from having so much experience at the museum prior to teachers college. Yeah. For camps, do you also provide it based on curriculum? Do students get credit, or is it just for fun? For our day camps, so technically everything can be curriculum connected, right? If you take a program and you look at it and you pull curriculum from the program versus creating it from the curriculum. So that's kind of usually what my process tends to be. What would be cool and fun and unique, and how can I pull curriculum out of that, as opposed to designing programming from the curriculum expectations, which are sometimes very rigid. So technically, yes, I could pull curriculum connections from our day camps, but we don't specifically align it with the curriculum, but it definitely fits into that. when we think about the triangle, right? Learning in the community, no matter what you're doing, is still learning, and it still influences their classroom learning as well. And so no, students don't get credit for it. It's just for fun, but yes, they are learning in it. And yes, it is curriculum connected, but we don't advertise the curriculum connections or anything like that. I know the pension is a huge draw for teachers. Are you able to contribute to the same pension program as classroom teachers being an OCT in a community setting? No. That is definitely something that I get asked a ton. Don't you want your summers off, or don't you want the pension, things like that. That being said, if you are able to balance a community teaching position with supply work, in my supply work, I am contributing to the pension. So not necessarily. I will say that some of the jobs at the school board that are in the learning coordinator roles or TOSAs, they are sometimes an in-between of kind of like a community-based learning or teaching job. I only say this because my husband is a learning coordinator for Thames Valley, so I feel like I know quite well what he does. So he's one of the technology learning coordinators. So he's a contract teacher that is working at the school board office for 4 years. And his job is to help classroom teachers integrate technology into their spaces in a way that's beneficial for students. Obviously, this year, a lot of that has been around full remote learning. But a lot of the jobs at the board office tend to be more flexible and creative with the curriculum. My contact at Thames Valley that we partner with for our in-class programs is kind of like that. She doesn't have students that are in her class right now, but she does more of the liaising between the board and community organizations, organizing things like that. So no is the answer, but you can balance it with other things that do contribute to pension. So yeah, like as long as you work 10 days in Thames Valley, you do contribute to pension as long as you work 10 supply days. So that's what I do every year. I work the minimum number of days or more. This year I've worked around 30. So there is an option there. Can you talk more about museum school? Typically, do students from the class attend? Do all students? Yes, the entire class comes. And then is it a paid program? Yes, so it's hugely funded though. So many of them receive subsidies because it is an expensive program, particularly around busing. Think of busing to and from the museum every day for a week. Museum school is amazing. It's much more flexible. We think of, for us, we run it based on a theme. So a teacher says, I want to get my pulleys and gears unit done. Great. We'll do pulleys and gears every single day for 2 hours in the morning. And then they get exploration time for the rest of their day, and obviously like time to eat and things like that. But yeah, museum school is amazing. It's hugely funded through the donors for the Heritage Council. If you haven't heard of museum school, you can go on the Heritage Council's website and check it out. There's so many partner organizations, Museum London, Fanshawe Pioneer Village, the Museum of Archaeology, and many others. I think the Jet Aircraft Museum is even participating. And yeah, it's a really big program that's quite complex, and it's run differently everywhere. So it's kind of hard for me to explain exactly museum school, but for us, the teacher chooses a section of the curriculum. I design it specifically for them. Students come in every day. They set up a classroom in one of our multi-use spaces. So the rooms that we usually use for birthday parties or public programs, things like that. That's their classroom for the week. I set up all of their activities in there. Sometimes they're in the exhibits. Sometimes we go out for walks along the river because of our location. And then, yeah, students attend every day, like a field trip every single day. And it's amazing the stuff that the kids come out with and the different students that benefit most from the week-long field trip. I can't tell you how many times I've had teachers say, this student is not usually this engaged in what we're doing in the classroom, or seems a lot more shy in the classroom. And then when I talk to mom or dad who's there hosting the field trip, they'll say, oh, well, we used to come to the Children's Museum all the time when they were little, or whenever they've got that comfort with the Children's Museum, or just the more relaxed atmosphere, being on a field trip, those kinds of things. So yeah, museums school is amazing. All the different organizations that help to run it. So the Heritage Council almost they do intake of the forms and they decide who which classrooms are assigned to which locations. And then the locations have a lot of autonomy over like how you run your program. So yeah. And yes, only the new location will remain open to the public once it's ready. And like I said, we're in the architectural planning and exhibit design phase, which is awesome. Yeah, no problem. If there's anything else, I'm happy to answer. Yeah, so I guess like if you're curious about community-based learning, like feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to chat. I was just chatting with someone from Brock's Teachers College last week about different opportunities. So if you're curious, you can feel free to reach out. Our in-class educator positions always get hired in September. So I know you guys are all in school, but once you're done, feel free to check out our website. It's a yearly contract, so they always go out as long as we have the partnership with Thames Valley. And I know there's lots of other organizations like ourselves that offer teaching positions for field trips and things like that as well. So just know that there are options outside of the school board if you're not sure if that's a good fit for you just yet. And it's okay to try out both. That's why I started supply teaching as well, just to try it out, because I knew I loved my job at the Children's Museum, but I hadn't done the classroom side of things yet. And so I started doing supply work, and actually for me, I enjoy balancing both. Yeah, it's been beneficial for me. Oh, thanks, Lauren. That's nice of you to say. Yes, I hope all of you have made it to the Children's Museum at some point in your life. And if you haven't, you should. We're free on Thursday nights when we're open. So it's definitely a good opportunity to check out the Children's Museum. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me, Stefania.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. That was definitely a wonderful presentation. I loved all the curriculum connections too. It's so like deeply like immersed in the curriculum. It's almost like a no-brainer for teachers.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Totally. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming. If anybody, I see a lot of people are exiting, but just please make sure you complete your check for understanding form so we can mark that you've attended this session. So thank you again, Jessie, for coming. Jessie's email is on the screen if you guys want to reach out to her, or if you want to go to the London Children's Museum website, I'm sure you can explore their programs over there as well. All right. I'm going to stop recording.